I always feel betrayed when a movie like does something radical and then the character wakes up and you're like, oh, it was a dream the whole time? Well, you.
The latest film from Barbarian director Zach Cregger, Weapons, traces the fallout of a horrific disappearance. 17 kids from the same elementary school class wander out of their homes at the exact same time in the middle of the night to God knows where. But the path that it traces through that narrative is not a straight line. Cregger employs a non-linear story structure, segmenting Weapons into chapters which each center on one of the characters affected by the disappearances.
Weapons is structured in such a way that each character's perspective adds something to the overall mystery that is kind of unraveling. Was that the plan from the start for you?
I didn't have a plan, so no. But like I like to just kind of write and not know anything. So I start and then I have no idea where it's going to go, and I try and just like turn my brain off and let the story tell me what it wants to be. But at about the midway point, you kind of start to have ideas. You can't help it. And so yes, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like midway through, I knew I was like, I want to do it in these different, subjective stories, and each story needs to advance the central plot. So I knew from the cold open that I was like, I got a teacher.
Yep.
That's a great way in. So I knew I was going to start with her, and then I got an angry parent. That's great. So I knew that was going to be, on the menu. And then I was like, I want a cop with a mustache because there's something about Magnolia and John C. Reilly, and I was just like, I want to put that character in this movie. I don't know why, but that belongs. So I knew I was going to get to that third, and then I was like, a junkie, that feels like a good counterbalance to the cop. And so I kind of could smell that these other people were going to be coming along.
For their part, the cast that Cregger assembled found that nonlinear structure to be a real playground for exploring their characters.
Everything was appealing about it. The bleed over, I've said it a million times, but Guillermo Arriaga and Iñárritu, did a thing where it was non-linear storytelling, their first maybe 3 movies together. Nolan did it in the beginning with The Following. It was a non-linear thing. I've always found that to be really interesting. I wrote a book that's non-linear that goes back and forth because I think that's how we think. It's like we think in these pieces, and then we like putting the pieces together and then trying to figure out what the whole of something is. So when I read this, I don't know, the design of it was so intriguing. I didn't know him, and then he came in and he told me this kind of what I didn't expect, this incredible emotional depth where it all had come from, where he was dealing with grief, and his reaction to that grief became a character. Every reaction became a new character. So one was anger, one was sadness, one was resentment. I just thought that was so intriguing, and just really liked him as a very raw, open human being. So I thought, God, man, if he can make films on top of it, yeah.
It's so rich. I mean, you basically the movie kind of starts over in many times, and every time that happens, you get a different insight into both the narrative of like the mystery of what's actually happening, but kind of just as much into what's going on inside of these people, where they're coming from, why this person did that thing you saw them do a few minutes ago, but now you understand it in this whole other context. I mean, the movie is like, there's so much story density. I just love that about it.
We talked about the intention of the scene and that in depth and in a way, but I also think what's so brilliant about Zach is that he trusts us as well, where he just allows us to play. And when something doesn't work, he comes in and he fixes it, and when it does, he just kind of lets it be in a way, and that you would think that's more common, but it's actually not.
Cregger takes a handful of opportunities to stage certain moments a little differently when they're being experienced by someone else later on in the film.
As you were performing those scenes while you were shooting, was it such that you were doing them slightly differently depending on whose perspective the scene was from, or did you play the scenes straight and Zach just sort of chopped it up in the edit? How did that work shooting it?
I mean, that's a really good question. For me, everything that I did was pretty much the same, with one exception, which is that I do some things in my part of the story that I then do in someone else's part of the story, and in that person's part of the story, that character's mentality and where his head is at is really different. And so Zach, and this was a surprise to me, was like, we're gonna do this really differently, this particular part. And so I played that very differently because it's through through Austin's character's head.
On top of its non-standard structure, Weapons also represents a sharpening of the blend of dread and dark comedy that Cregger used to great effect in Barbarian. It leaves the twists and turns of Weapons feeling even more hard to pin down, and Cregger prioritized casting actors who would be able to trust that it would all come together in the final cut.
How do you have these conversations with your actors on set when you're asking something of them that is going to make total sense within the context of the cut, but maybe not in the moment?
You have to find an actor that doesn't need to have that conversation. That's the real answer. It's like, there were actors that I read with that were phenomenally talented, but the humor just didn't get it. And everyone I have intrinsically understands the vibe. I would never ever go and try and explain a joke to one of my actors or try and get them to, maybe little tiny like, hey, wait a half beat, that kind of thing. But if I have to explain why it's funny, we're all wasting our time.
I mean, there's a couple of moments that I still don't know, and I won't mention what they are, but did I need to know? No, not necessarily. But there were moments, if I know what you're saying, that the moments that kind of lean toward obscure absurdity that confused me, no. I've worked with so many filmmakers that embrace that kind of thing that I think it's my sensibility anyway, the Coens being probably the number one, because that's how I perceive this experience, life, you know what I mean?
There's something very, very wrong going on.
Pushing Weapons hard into dread-inducing territory are a pair of nightmare sequences with muted sound design that evokes The Exorcist, and they represent some of the most surreal moments of the movie.
How do you nail a nightmare?
The secret is to declare that it's a nightmare at the beginning. I always feel betrayed when a movie does something radical and then the character wakes up and you're like, oh, it was a dream the whole time? Well, f*** you. That's so exploitative. Nick of Time, that Johnny Depp movie, is the worst example of this. And I remember I saw that when I was 13. I was like, I'll never do that in a movie, and I never will. But so it's for Julia's nightmare, it's we see her in bed having the dream. Josh's nightmare, he looks and he sees himself asleep in the bed, so we know it's a dream. Then I can do whatever I want, and I'm playing by the rules. But I feel like when a movie pulls the rug out from under you and then tells you it's a dream, I feel betrayed.
As Cregger mentions there, Josh Brolin's Archer has one of Weapons' nightmares, and true to the movie's gallows humor, Archer responds to his very, very weird dream with a very, very Brolin-esque reaction.
There's a moment where you get to deliver just a 10 out of 10 perfect what the f***. And I want to know...
So funny how that's a lot of people have mentioned that.
Well, it punctuates such a moment of tension in the film, and it's this break.
Or it's something that everybody
build.
can identify with.
Yeah, how many times did you have to shoot that on set? Was that something that you
No,
had
we
to do
just
multiple
did.
times?
We just chose to. We chose to do it because I know you're going to sit in the editing room and what you think is right, and while you're doing it, you go, it's such a... Every time we did it, it was just a little bit different. Should it be that? Should it be that? Should it be that? So ultimately, he chose the perfect one, I think. Yeah. It's not, I didn't think it would be the one that he chose, but it was just off enough. I think there's even a break in my voice where it's unhinged.
Unhinged is a really great word to describe Weapons. It is scary and funny, and repeat viewings are sure to turn up more connective tissue between the storylines. But for Cregger's part, the process of writing and making the movie was as much a discovery for him as it will be for the audience.
I try not to have any sort of philosophy about this stuff. The only philosophy I have as a writer, the only one, is to not know. And once I kind of have a code or a set of rules for myself beyond keep it surprising, I think I might be doomed. So that's the only, it's not satisfying, but it's the only thing I got, is try to just stay as blind and stay as open as possible.
For more on Weapons, check out my review of the movie, and as always, keep it right here on IGN.